But I want us to transition to what's hurting Kenyans. And of course, we've seen that recommendation by the President's Working Party on Education, recommending that the fees for universities should be tripled from 32,000 a year to some 53,000 or thereabouts every semester. And of course, if you triple that, then it may become difficult for learners to access school. We're already seeing challenges in the Form 1 transition. Not many. Actually, the Citizen TV is reporting 200,000 learners have not joined their secondary schools. The other thing is the question of the situation in the economy. We've heard the president saying that the international financial systems have opened and they're accessing more than they need. Honorable Osoro, beginning with you, knowing the challenges that have been going through and knowing that the administration wants to reduce the debt appetite, how are we going to finance, first of all, the basic programs, but also looking ahead to make it easier for Mwananchi at a time that there are all these complaints? You're not able to afford school fees, CDF is not coming on time for the bursaries. Now there's that conversation to even raise the fees for universities.
Number one, Sam, I do not know the committee that you chair, because men happen to be members of several committees. I hope it's a good committee that you are the chairman too.
Carry on.
Now, I agree with you that the economic status of this country is not really doing very well, and it affects every person, and so it affects the universities. And it's very important for us to like, on the flip side, when we were discussing with you before we came on air, we say that in as much as there are things that really need to have a conversation over. In as much as we are talking about the university's fund proposal, raising the fee, or proposing to have the fee raised from, I think, 16,000 to about 50,000, thereabout. In as much as we really want to complain about it generally, there are things that we also need to ask ourselves. The setup for such fees was, I think it was a recommendation of 1989. So over the years, 1989, we're talking about 34 years down the line, the very same amount has been, the allocation per student over the years, 16,000. It really doesn't make sense that with the economic status, the 16,000 of 1989 is not, it's actually like 6,000 in, or even 3,000 in this very era if you go on ratio basis. And that recommendation, it's a discussion that we really need to have. But again, on the flip side, there are things that we also need to ask ourselves. That our universities, what are they really teaching? Like, the universities have become so hard on self-reliance, like it's almost becoming impossible to be self-reliant, that we really got to depend on the exchequer for us to survive, that we depend on exchequer to still pay overheads and stuff like that over the years, and yet you're producing graduates, really. There are things that we really need to discuss. It's maybe wrong priorities, wrong choice of heads of the institutions. I was in Rwanda, Kigali, the other day, actually last week, and I found, was it Kenyatta University's building, in Kigali, that was bought by taxpayers' money, using billions and billions of money, that is not in use. And same to, there is another university that has got I think in Nairobi University, a building in Uganda. There is one that has got some hotel in an abandoned hotel in Mombasa. You can imagine what are we really doing wrong as a country? Because here, the economy is not really doing very right. So clearly, our lecturers and staff and everything and growth of universities is becoming a challenge. But still, we are setting the cap of universities fund at 16,000. Even with the growth of students per year, because then the number of students in 1989 is not commensurate with the number of students in this time and era. So that is a discussion that we really need to have. But do we really need to depend entirely on the exchequer? entirely, that we've got to depend on the exchequer for us to survive. And that is why universities like Egerton are going down. Because of such discussions, we've really not thought of reviewing such.
Right.
Is it about time that we think about, fee increment? Is it about time? So such discussions, those are the things that we also need to ask ourselves.
But let me
close down some universities that do not really make economic value in terms of they can't really think. There are times when I was growing up, I used to imagine Egerton University, for example, they used to be well known in agriculture and matters, farming and stuff like that. Why are they not producing? Why can't they feed? Universities in some developed countries feed the nation through their technology, but this we don't do.
So let me ask you a question. Yes, there are those challenges, but in the education sector, the primary education, free primary education. Secondary education, it is subsidized, 22,000 per learner in public institutions. You get to the university, at the moment there's a bit of support. I think it's about 8,000 or so, if I'm not mistaken.
16,000 capitation.
Capitation, okay, capitation, right. So when you start now increasing the fees and pushing that burden to the parent or the student, how are they supposed to meet their needs at a time that you also know that 200,000 learners of KCSE 2022 have not been able to join school for the same reason, school fees?
No, it's a discussion that we need to have, work on the capitation increase, and then have a basic conversation. Because, Sam, you can't be working here at the Royal Media Services over the years and there is no salary increase, even 1,000 shillings. So even as you seek your salary increase, there is what we call, like I hear my speaker likes saying, noblesse oblige. That is my speaker, Moses Etangula. That even as we discuss that, you don't just look at your benefits alone. Also look at the value of, beyond your benefits, how are you leaving the university? What status do you leave your university at by the time you are exiting? So the economic status of the country is you see, we also need to appreciate where we've come from in the education sector. That now there is an element of subsidy on secondary, that you give 22,000 if it's national school, the government pays 22,000 and you pay some amount of money. So at least we've come of age that we are growing gradually to the level where education will be entirely free. Yes. But the university is left as it is. If it's capitation, it's as it is. If it's the fees, it's as it is. Then you still want to produce quality education. You still want to lecturers to to have quality in terms of their service delivery. You still want them paid high. You see them striking left, right, and center when they are not paid as they want. You want the salary, the fee to remain the same. Really, it doesn't make sense. It's a conversation. I'm not really saying that we entirely go to that direction, but we really need to have that conversation. Is it really viable to have the same amount that people were paying in the 80s, still paid in the...
Okay, I hear you. Honorable Mbui, in 2019, I think the month was May, C.S. Magoha, the late, was facing representatives from the universities, some of them vice-chancellors, and he was telling them at that time the cost of education was about 500 billion shillings. I think it's still around that figure, more than 500 billion anyway. And he was telling them there's no more money that is going to come to you as universities. You have to find ways of looking for resources. C.S. Machogu has come in and told them you need to look for alternative sources of revenue for your universities. Where do you take this conversation at a time we still have those challenges of the Mwananchi? And also there's that trend that you observe that Kenyans are sort of becoming a bit dependent on how to educate their children. How do you improve these situations moving forward and still have quality?
Sam, first, I think it's important to mention that education is extremely important in any nation. In fact, if you look at some of these countries that are doing very well, if you go to Malaysia and you follow their history, you realize that one of the things they did for them to be able to fast-track their developmental growth was to educate their populace. They sent people to the US, MIT, technological, colleges there and other places. And by the time the people came back, they came back with quite a lot of ideas. Now, our problem in Kenya is that At the beginning, I think we almost had it right. But as we proceed, I think what is happening is that the cost of education is becoming, you know, almost a preserve of the rich. You know, when I listen to the Honorable Soro talk about, you know, education in 1989, university education, I want to remind you that in 1989, university education was free for parents and the students. They were not paying anything. And, but now they are paying, because in 1989, that was around the time I was there, and the education was free. In fact, the government used to give students money for pocket money, for buying books, and, you know, all the students at the university were accommodated, you know, properly taken care of and fed. Now university students are like, in fact, you know what is happening is that they are skipping meals, you know, they are struggling. It's really a pathetic situation. Now, parents have to choose between putting food on the table and educating their children in this country now. And that, when you put that choice, obviously food will win. And so education will become a thing of the past. I think that even if we are to come up with ideas of increasing, you know, cost of education and maybe, you know, pushing a burden to parents, this is the wrong time. For me, I'm looking at what people are going through, and I believe that there's a time for everything. Kenyans are hungry. There is drought that is ravaging the country. For us to come out and say that this is a time we want to increase fees for university from this amount to this amount is really, you know, it's really the worst time. And some, let me tell you, because I think the government must be responsive to the needs of the people. As we are talking now, NSSF has been proposed to be increased from the contributions of 200 shillings per month to 1,000 plus. And even the employers are supposed to pay more than 1,000 from 200. Now, how would you, you know, for goodness sake, why would you expect that to be done at a time when the country is struggling economically? Why not delay these ideas so that we can at least come through these difficult times, which are not, I would not say is caused by the government, but these things to do with the, you know, after effects of COVID, also the drought situation. Why not wait until we finish this phase and the country stabilizes?
But if the president has said that we need to increase our savings so that the government can be borrowing from our own savings at a cheaper rate. Just hold on. So if we're to look for a sustainable way of financing our programs as a country, how do we achieve that? Sam,
let me ask, you know, because I've had that theory. It's a very good theory when things are okay, when things are rosy. But right now, you're telling me that someone who's going hungry increases their savings so that they can die of starvation and save money for their old age. Who gets old when they're dead? I mean, this is a time when we must allow our people to be able to consume what they have, because, you know, times are hard, and we all know. I just feel that this government is not responsive to the needs of the people, and that's where the problem is. And that is happening because they came into power through, you know, a lot of good stories, and Kenyans believed some of those stories. Unfortunately, they probably had no clue about how to run government, and that's why we are here discussing what they should do about education, what they should do about health, what they should do about everything. It's really a big problem. Maybe KJ has a solution.
Sam, I have a solution.
He's been crafting
I have a solution, and before we go to the solution, let's just say that education did not start going down the last 5 months that Kenya Kwanza government has been in office. Sam, when we get to such a point, we have to just now start thinking of innovations. The way universities were set up was right, and I want to agree with the Honorable Mbui that there was a time that we got these things right. Sam, if you remember back in the past, any university that was set up came with a special purpose. You knew Jomo Kenyatta University was technology in agriculture. You knew KU was a training ground for teachers. You knew professionals were trained in UON. You knew if you go to Egerton, you will find agriculturalists. Today, universities have diverted from their core business and they've gone to commercializing programs to a point where a university that would have specifically been a science research university is today offering diplomas in whatever you can imagine. So with the setup of the university, the whole university framework needs rethinking. Going forward, Sam, the cost of university education shall not be mitigated by increasing school fees. It shall actually be sorted by going into innovation. This whole drive of an open university ought to be considered very seriously. With the technology available today, with the digital literacy at the levels that we have them at in Kenya, today you can imagine anyone around the country is using USSD codes to access their financial services through services like M-Pesa, meaning that we are a very digitally illiterate population. How about we start thinking about moving university education away from the brick and mortar monuments of constructions built in so elaborate ways, but becoming such a big expense for universities, they're not even able to pay for the loans that they took to build these buildings. Why don't we move this education out of these buildings and into technology where a student will affordably be able to take up tuition without the extra costs of the other added costs of boarding, accommodation, services that go into paying subordinate staff and so on. Look at the costs, at the expenditure in universities. You will be shocked. The biggest sum of monies is utilized not for the core function of instruction and learning. It is used for support services. You go into a university, you will find that the lecturer is pushed to a small, nasty, dirty corner somewhere in a department, while the most elaborate building, massive, beautiful building, is housing people called administrators. They're administrating the education of the student and the teaching of the lecturer. The lecturer ends up not getting paid his fees, but the administration block, the way you see it looking resplendent, even the people inside there doing the administration are better taken care of than even the core business of the lecturer. So the model of the university has to be reimagined, and it has to be reimagined in line with the aspirations of a country. If we want to go into manufacturing, if we want to go to value addition, then let's have TVETs, tertiary college, universities that are aligning to the core business that we have called our aspiration as a country.
But Honorable Kerry, what are your thoughts? Because yes, we can do all that, but still you find there's a serious difficulty in learners accessing education because they can't pay for it. And it's becoming unsustainable because we have so many stories that we tell every day on Citizen TV of learners that need help. But this is just a very small percentage of the situation in the country.
That's why some are opening your mind to innovation. The Open University, if for example...
I'm talking about even the lower levels of education,
yes,
secondary school.
I'll get down to that.
Yeah.
If you have aspirations as a country, you know what the university needs to produce. So now you align the university to what is intended for market. If you know what the university needs, then the high school shall start preparing a student for the courses that are being offered at the university. Now, at high school level, you might even think of separating academics with the skills development so that you might in future see the return of technical schools. In places where they're going ahead with technology, you find that the technical high schools are even way more attractive than the academic high schools. Because today in Kenya, all we're trying to do is produce white-collar professionals for jobs that do not exist. So we'll have to realign our education to the aspirations that we have as a country. And this idea I'm talking about, the Open University, it is not KJ, the chairman of Committee of Information and Innovation, who is pushing for an open university just as a castle being built in the air. Just look across the border and see what the Open University of Tanzania is doing in terms of solving the problems of education in that country. Just look at any open university anywhere around the country, around the continent. In Nigeria, the open universities in Nigeria is doing amazing work. Globally, there are good examples of open universities that are doing extremely well in aligning the training and the learning to the aspirations of the country affordably where education finds the student, not the student going to seek education in positions that are not available.
I hear you, Honorable KJ. Should I just call you that? John Kerry.
But you are asking for solutions. I think the innovation is the way to go for education.
Honorable Soro, so still on the question of the economy, because last week during the prayers, and I don't know that Honorable Mbui was attending, the president said that the international financial systems are starting now to open to the country, and we're accessing more than we need. David Ndii on Citizen TV said that they had been able to negotiate from $250 million, is it? No, 250 million shillings with the IMF up to 400 million actually. What is the plan? I think it should be billion. What is the plan, even at a time that you're trying to control the debt accumulation?
We are actually in catch-22 situation as the Kenya Kwanza administration. And on this, I may choose to hold brief for the executive, because I am privy to the information that we really are not doing very well as a country economically. And it's a sad situation of affairs. By the way, at this point, I think it's important for me to disclose that on the hearings of proposals, the supplementary budget that is ongoing now in the National Assembly, it's actually a very sad situation, because the president has instructed the ministries to downsize and cut down their budgets and needs, some up to about 1 billion, others up to 500 million and stuff like that. It's going to be a bit challenging, because we really cannot sustain ourselves as an economy. Because really, I don't know what the intention was, but really, and it's hard to say, and some people call it politics, but the previous regime really messed up the economy. Even up to 3 days to elections, some suppliers were paid a lot of money, but that is a discussion for another day.
Who?
Some people were paid up to, it was actually the account were drawn up to billions and billions.
And state agencies were being sold 4 days to election.
4 days to election.
Were they deserving?
No, not deserving cases. And some, those are some of the things that will be discussed in the coming days. Because of course, if you start discussing right now, people will start saying, it's blame games. There are people who are being targeted. But at some point, I saw a farm paid of, UNGA subsidy, up to 32 billion, 2 days to election. There is no justification for that. There was no such a subsidy. 32 billion, 2 days to election.
And today millers are crying.
And millers are still crying, some of them. But it was a specific one that was paid. So it is a very sad situation of affairs. But let me say this. The economy is not really doing very well. We've got to find ways to mitigate, at least for now, as we seek for further local revenue, to collect more revenue that we are able to. Because it's not about increasing, but convincing and telling people to pay taxes so that we are able to be self-sustaining as a country. As it is right now, we are really not self-sustaining. We've got to depend on such people like, bodies like IMF and stuff like that. Because although it is short-lived, we are moving rightly in the normal engagement. Even when you go through the paper and you see, how the share world is moving and stuff like that, you will realize that people are really interested in putting up in Kenya in terms of investment. So in another few months, our share revenue locally, our collection revenue locally will be higher and will be self-sustaining, because it's challenging that much of the money that we collect goes back to paying debts.
But how does it go up at a time that the businesses are struggling? They are feeling the pinch, like what Honorable Mbui is saying, that now, if you have a staff size of 1,000 and you pay 1,080 shillings for every worker, that's an extra million shilling every month. That is 12 million shillings every year. So the cost of doing business is continuing to go up. Some also want to collect more.
There is what you call tax evasion, and there is tax avoidance. And the regimes that have come before us, especially the very immediate one, was using intimidation to encourage people to pay taxes. And that is why you've seen, or in as much as sometimes we castigate the deputy president, the DCI have been withdrawn from the KRA offices. What we are doing, in as much as the businesses are struggling, there are people who are avoiding to pay tax.
And avoiding is fine, is it?
And it's, of course, it's not. It's okay because you're not really criminally liable, but evasion is criminal. So what we are telling people is that, hey, kindly, this is your country. You need good roads. You need electricity. You need quality service across. You actually need education to be cheap. You know, you want universities to do well. You want your kid to go to school. So we're making people aware that there is importance of paying, taxes. And let me tell you something, it is actually working. Even as people, businesses are struggling, but we are able to get, if about 5 businesses are struggling and they are all paying taxes, that little tax is what we are telling people to pay. Unlike how it was, that yes, you've intimidated some people, they've quit business, you're only getting collection from 2 people who are still struggling, 2 businesses that are struggling. So we will get to a level where the economy will be doing very well as a country.
I hear you. I just wanted to correct some figures I gave. It's David Ndii said that the figures, the amount from IMF was negotiated from $250 million to $400 million. Converting that is about 31.4 billion shillings, from 31.4 billion shillings to 50.3 billion.
And Sam, having people like David Ndii
right
in this government, trust me, you will not go wrong economically. These are people who are they are known to be well versed with economics, matters world over. It's surprisingly, President Kagame mentioned him to me last week. How is my friend David Ndii? He helped, drive this country. So I got shocked. You know him. So he's a person who is known.
All right. Let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us via Citizen TV Kenya. Sam Gichuku, hashtag to use is Debrek. And begin with Bob Otieno is saying that big names shortlisted for CS job is a good move because they come with mass experience. Running government institutions can't be handled by newbies. Amaganga, Parliament should consider views from Kenyans and ensure the entire institution is revamped from constituency to national level. The only medicine to remove brokers acting as IBC clerks to influence voting activities from the campaign season to results announcements. Asamo, legitimacy and legality are different. The process of a credible electoral process is very clear. You don't plant IBC commissioners to coronate presidents. All right. Mbui Roberts, you're tweeting us, so this is someone else. As a nation, we need to be forward focused. The positions of CAS should be given to the emerging young leaders and not political sycophants. But you would have said that, yeah?
I said that.
Engineer Lazaro, I think DP should be a unified figure in the Republic. Very unfortunate to hear negative utterances that can only tear the country down to the line of ethnicity and political affiliations. All Kenyans are paying tax to the Kenya Kwanza regime. I thought it's the government of Kenya. All right. Yeah. Flavian Mulamba, you're saying that IBC has been improving over time, and this is evident by the number of election petitions filed in 2022. Any attempts to derail this improvement should be defeated at the earliest opportunity. Mapema ndio best. Godi Baraza, Azimio should stay put and take part in submitting a name for the IBC commissioner slot. They are opting out of the process at this stage is an impending recipe for tumultuous political engagement going forward. Did you have to use tumultuous there? Rev Harry, you're saying the process government is employing to revive the shrinking economy should be supported by all. And on the issue of universities, let the ministry, stakeholders save this once and for all. God bless. And Mugasia, the bulldozing of the formation of IBC, complemented by DP Gashagua's statement that their government is a company of shareholders, are actions that are reversing all the gains we have achieved in democracy and inclusivity. We are headed in the wrong direction. That's according to Mugasia. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for us. We'll continue to have these conversations, especially on the question of the situation in the economy, looking at what experts are saying, what ordinary Kenyans are saying, what they're feeling, what the experience is, and what solutions can be found. And also to appreciate the good work of John Kerry. He's been drawing a few things. You'll have to draw.
Doodling. It heightens your attention.
All right, my name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time. Bye for now.